President Trump is looking to give his economic message a jolt to close out the year, and he's hoping the Federal Reserve's final interest rate decision of 2025, just hours away now, will give him a boost. The president was in Pennsylvania last night, a state he narrowly won in 2024, thanks in large part to voters' economic concerns. But he mocked Democrats' recent focus on those concerns. And despite data that shows prices rising and polling that suggests widespread stress over affordability, he presented a cheery view of the economy.
You're doing better than you've ever done. Tariffs are bringing us hundreds of billions of dollars. I just helped our farmers out because they're starting to do really well. You're getting lower prices, bigger paychecks. We're getting inflation. We're crushing it.
Let's bring in MS Now White House reporter Laura Barone-Lopez, CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Leisman, University of Michigan economics professor Justin Wolfers, and PBS NewsHour co-anchor and MS Now political contributor Jeff Bennett. Laura, what else did we hear from the president last night? This was a long 90-minute speech of sorts. And how was his message received?
Yeah, it was a very long speech, Anna, and it took the president about 15 minutes before he even mentioned the word affordability and started talking about voters' concerns there. He repeated his past claims, saying that affordability is a hoax, is a con job, but he also then said maybe he shouldn't be saying that about affordability. Take a listen.
I can't say affordability hoax because I agree the prices were too high, so I can't go to hoax because they'll misconstrue that. But they use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously.
But as Americans are heading into the holiday season, Anna, the president also said that Americans could do with less, as you mentioned at the top, that they don't need as many pencils or as many dolls as they previously have had before. I should also note, though, Anna, that this speech, again, as I said, was very meandering, the president going far off topic, as he is wont to do. And included in this speech was his recent racist attacks on immigrants in the U.S., on Somalis, calling Somalia filthy and disgusting. And he also said that he was wondering out loud why America was taking people from, quote, shithole countries, and that he would prefer if America could take people from predominantly white countries like Norway and Denmark. So very far off topic from what his advisors and what many Republicans want him to focus on, which is the economy. Anna.
There's so much there we could discuss, but sticking with the economy for this segment, the president really leaned into this idea that prices aren't actually rising. Let's watch more.
We're bringing those prices down rapidly, lower prices, bigger paychecks. You're getting lower prices, bigger paychecks. We're getting inflation. We're crushing it. And you're getting much higher wages.
Justin, are wages much higher? Is inflation being crushed? Has either issue improved since Biden left office?
Look, what I want, Anna, is for us to have honest conversations about the economy. Prices are rising. People feel that. Those are two realities. Another reality is that prices tend to rise in modern economies. It's called inflation. What we typically try to do is not get prices to fall, but get them to rise sufficiently slowly that you barely notice it. When the president says prices are falling, he's lying. When he says he's going to get prices down, he really shouldn't, because the only way to get prices down is to crush the economy. Let's have a mature and responsible conversation. Prices are rising, and what we want from policy is for them to rise slowly and for people to have an opportunity to get wage rises so that their overall quality of life can do more than keep up, actually get ahead.
Jeff, just saying all these good things are happening, does that work politically?
No, it doesn't, and would not need to look any further in recent political history than the Biden administration. President Biden presided over an objectively strong economy on paper, But too many of the American people didn't feel that way. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump got reelected. So the fault lines here when it comes to this issue of the high cost of living and affordability are clear. It's what helped lift Democrats in those off-year elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Just in Miami last night, there was a Democrat who won the Miami mayor's race, the first time a Democrat had won that seat in 30 years. We don't know to what degree affordability played into that. But Democrats hope that affordability in the midterms will be for them what healthcare was back in 2018. You'll remember Democrats ran on preserving healthcare when Republicans were trying to dismantle it. And they not only won the House majority, they netted 41 seats. And Anna, I got to tell you, in advance of speaking with you this morning, I reached out to a top aide to a senior congressional Republican and this person said to me rhetorically, can we just get a modicum of message discipline from the president? Because Republicans in Congress, frontline Republicans certainly know that so much of their political fate hinges on whether or not the American people feel good about their own stations financially in life.
Steve, the president also defended his tariffs, saying it's helping Pennsylvania steel manufacturers. Take a listen.
We're also reviving Pennsylvania manufacturing, and with our historic tariffs, steel production is roaring back. We're building steel mills all over the country. You need steel. You know, you can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. Because under the China policy, you know, every child can get 37 pencils. They only need one or two. You know, they don't need that many. But you always need steel. You don't need 37 dolls for your daughter. 2 or 3 is nice, but you don't need 37 dolls.
There are those dolls and pencils and toy comments that Laura referenced earlier. But again, he was talking steel to begin with. Has the U.S. steel industry seen a boost, Steve? And what about the broader impact from Trump's tariffs?
If I could just make one comment ahead of time, I lived in Russia from 92 to 98, and it was the Soviet Union that had a government that determined how many pencils and how many dolls you could have. That is not essentially a decision that should be made by government. It should be up to individuals how many pencils they want to have, how many dolls, how many of anything they want to have. There is some increase in raw steel production. It looks like it is in the Midwest and in the South as well. But I don't think that tells the story. The story is that America, more than anything, uses finished steel products and imports a bunch of it and uses it. Prices are higher, and there's been a pretty profound impact on manufacturing among those who use those inputs there. So we may be producing more raw steel right now, and I would not argue with whether or not that's a national security issue. But in terms of the economy, I think what you're looking for is the price of inputs and whether or not this is helping manufacturing, and I don't think it is.
And I think it's important to look at the bigger picture. If you just look at Pennsylvania, the broader economic landscape there, hiring has flattened. And the Philly Fed points out in parts of the state, warehouse workers are getting fewer hours on the job. Home sales are decreasing. Factory activity has actually weakened. Plus, you have those Obamacare premiums set to spike by about 21% in Pennsylvania. Governor Josh Shapiro slammed the president, telling Politico, quote, his policies have hurt the very communities that propelled him to the White House. Justin, are President Trump's policies to blame?
I think there's a lot of pain out there right now. Often we'd say that there's not much that a president can do to shape the economy, except this is a president who's given no deference at all to Congress. And so the president has done a lot of things. Well, let's be clear. He's imposed tariffs. As Steve pointed out, when you impose tariffs on steel, it's good if you're a steel worker, but steel is an input throughout the rest of the economy. Bad for all of them. We have mass deportations that's making it very difficult for some parts of the economy, particularly agriculture and construction, to get the workers they want. We had the big, beautiful bill, which is the largest redistribution of money from poor to rich in a single bill in American history. We've got the Obamacare subsidies expiring, which could lead to a big shock to the health insurance costs facing a lot of Americans. And we've had overall attempts to undermine Obamacare as well as the loss of renewable energy subsidies and a tax on SNAP. So if you want to see what's driving the affordability crisis, you don't need to look any further than the White House.
Steve, interest rates are another factor in the affordability crisis. The Fed's next rate decisions at 2 p.m. today. What are you watching for?
Yeah, let me make one other point here, which is that manufacturing jobs are down. And the more important thing, which I've been watching very closely, is that since the April tariffs, small business, according to ADP, has shed 250,000 workers. The prior 7 months, they had gained a 250,000 workers, and now in the 7 months since then. So that really sort of supports Justin's point here about how these tariffs ripple through the economy. We don't know if it's all tariffs, but certainly since April, you can see a demarcation line where small business jobs have really cratered. And I think that does lead into the interest rate conversation. The Fed is going to provide some relief today to lower interest rates by 0.25 point, and that would bring to 75 basis points, or 0.75 percentage point, the total declines that they've had this year so far. And I think the story here is that the Fed is in a very guarded way here, trying to bring down rates to help the economy, which has been hurt by various factors that are out there. But it has something which has been checking it, which is the inflation, which seems to be coming from the tariff side. I think it would like to bring rates down further towards a more neutral rate, or 3%. Instead, it's probably going to be stuck up a little bit higher as it waits for the impact of tariff inflation to work its way through the system.
Everybody has been looking at individual members on this board of governors as the Fed's making these interest rate decisions, because the president's focused so much on the Fed chair, criticizing Jerome Powell, whose term expires next year. And we're learning more about the process to pick his replacement. Laura, fill us in.
That's right, Anna. So the president is supposed to be in the final interviews, interviewing the final candidates for the potential successor to Jerome Powell to lead, to be the Fed chair. And the two people whose names have come up repeatedly is Kevin Warsh, he's a former Fed governor, as well as Kevin Hassett, who is the president's current director of the National Economic Council. Now, the president said that he thinks he's pretty positive. He already knows who he wants. He said that last night on Air Force One to a number of reporters. And the president had also recently said in an interview with Politico that that interest rates, whether or not the next Fed chair would lower interest rates, is a litmus test for him. So ultimately, that is clearly going to be key for the president, as well as loyalty. And that loyalty part is what is concerning some who think that the next Fed chair may, if they are more loyal to the president, would lower interest rates despite or even if inflation starts to come back, Anna.
So as we wait to see what the Fed will do today, the common theme from this president is that any economic pain is not his fault. President Trump blames other countries when it comes to tariffs. He blames specific companies. He blames other policymakers like Jerome Powell or President Biden. Jeff, he's been in office for almost a year. At what point do voters start rejecting all the finger pointing?
There was a recent Political poll, Anna, that showed a majority of those polled do not buy that argument, to your point, that this is President Biden's presidency, this is his economy, and that blaming Joe Biden won't work. So we will see whether it comes to affordability, the cost of living, the president's mixed messaging on tariffs. On the one hand, he's saying that tariffs are bringing in record revenue for the benefit of the American public. And at the same time, his administration is also instituting tariff carve-outs to help bring down the cost of some grocery staples like coffee and beef and even bananas. And then beyond that, to the whole conversation about the Fed, whether it's one of the two Kevins that Laura mentioned or someone else, whereas Jay Powell has spent the last couple of months, really the entirety of the second Trump term, defending the independence and the credibility of the Fed and making clear that all of his decisions are based on data and not necessarily pressure. Whomever inherits that role will have a different environment and will be making the opposite real argument that, that they are basing their decisions on data and not pressure from President Trump, while also somehow trying to remain in President Trump's good favor and projecting this sense of loyalty.
Guys, thank you so much for all the good analysis, for bringing us the reporting and the facts. Laura Barone Lopez, Steve Leisman, Justin Wolfers, and Jeff Bennett. I appreciate you all.